database as well. So this session is called the Yellow Pages for Fair Enabling Resources. It's going to be shared by myself. I'm Wolmar from the Elixir Sweden node, and then Barbara Magagna from GO-FAIR US. I see that we have the introductory slides for the International Data Week here, and we should acknowledge the ground that we're standing on and the first Australians who were on these traditional lands. So with that said, we can jump into our interactive exploration of these kind of fair enabling resources. And I'm hoping that this could be a dynamic discussion where some of you might be involved in providing guidance to different groups and looking for solutions on how you could adopt fair enabling resources yourself. So this is a birds of a feather session in the RDA. That means that we're exploring a topic and trying to find out if this is something that we would like to form an interest group or a working group around. The RDA defines the working group as something that has a defined remit of like 12 to 18 months and is designed to produce a recommendation or some output that's useful to the wider data community. The interest groups, they bring in perspectives from different stakeholder areas to discuss a topic and might be a little bit longer running. So either of these could be a conclusion, or we could decide that there are other groups or venues where these topics are sufficiently being covered and where we can continue the discussions. The RDA has a few guiding principles, and they align well with the principles that you're supposed to follow for the International Data Week. So please feel free to join the RDA if you're not already a member. The idea behind this session emerged from a discussion that we had last spring online in the Life Sciences Data Infrastructures Interest Group in the RDA about verification processes and how we can support them. And we had some examples from life science data infrastructures. We also had a number of speakers from outside of life sciences who presented promising solutions on how to implement the FAIR principles, but then also some steps in a process for guiding people to the best solution for their group. And this resulted in us thinking that this might be discussion to have a little bit more broadly outside of the life sciences and also bringing in some of the invited speakers that couldn't attend, unfortunately. So I reached out to GO-FAIR US, to CODATA, and to World Data Systems, which are organizations that have an overlap in interest in supporting the wider data ecosystem, and also heavy support of this event, of course. So we're going to have some examples guided by their activities, but then also from you in the audience and some of our experiences as individuals. So I would like this to be something where we can share experiences across ourselves. The objectives here, and these are the meeting objectives, but maybe also forward-looking for a potential interest group. So support the development of discipline or community-specific guidelines, workshops, or other interventions. So this is where the fair enabling resources would fit in. We could also bring in and showcase some examples of how, simple fair enabling resource collections, like just a list of references to publications or other ways of distributing best practice, could contextualize them. And maybe also some examples of how these collections have been created, curated, and used in different communities. And then try to identify some of the common features and user needs while exploring these shared challenges and trajectories for improving these resources across the different groups that are working on it. The agenda is first these 10 minutes as an introduction. We might pull over a few minutes, so don't take this as kind of the fixed agenda. But we have then some flash talks, we have a short Q&A, and then we start with a panel with a discussion that's going to be fueled by the questions here for the panelists. But then we are also going to invite you, and maybe those of you who sit a little bit alone or in the corners could scooch a little bit closer for that section and see if you could have some discussions amongst yourselves while we have this synthesis of what could be future venues for shared work. And then wrap up with some ideas for next steps. We have 2 online speakers who is not in the room. The others are sitting down here in the 2 tables. I'm going to invite them up on stage and introduce them individually. And then we have a Mentimeter for collecting questions. So primarily we should use this for the Q&A as well. And the reason for that is then we can add some voting, so you can say that this question would be extra relevant to work on. So let's switch to the Mentimeter quickly. And just to see that everyone has clocked in here or managed to get this up on their phone, maybe you could share which country you're from. And then we can see the number of people who are here, both online and including in the room. So I see, for example, a lot of people from Australia, which is maybe not strange since this is a local event. We also have a good number of people from the US. I can't type at the moment, otherwise there should be Sweden there as well. And I can see that we're starting to approach, let's see, 21 people or something like that that has responded to this. So yeah, I assume we have captured some of you already. And I mean, keep this up because we're going to use this for the Q&A and for the rest of the questions as well. So the second question I have here, and I'm just going to leave this open as we move over to my online co-chair, Barbara Magagna, from the GO-FAIR Foundation. So here you can maybe share a little bit of your experience from the FAIR principles. So I hope Barbara is here online. I haven't been able to hear her voice yet, so please. And if we could switch to the presentation again, that would be great. So do we have Barbara Magagna?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. We can hear you perfectly fine, Barbara.
Oh.
Nice to see you as well.
Good. Should I introduce myself?
Go ahead. I mean, briefly, and then just go ahead with the slides when you're ready.
Yes. So I am Barbara Magagna. I'm from GO-FAIR Foundation in the Netherlands. I'm there the coordinator for FAIR development and capacity building. And I will introduce to you a system, an ecosystem for FAIR enabling and FAIR supporting resources to support the FAIR implementation. So from the FAIR principles paper that we all know from 2016, we started to really identify possible characteristics that data should have to be machine actionable and fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And together with a group of people, we interpreted these principles because they are just broad guidelines, but not instructions how to go fair. So we published this in 2020 in a paper. Then we refined these interpretations and published them on our website. And this was somehow the starting point to develop a questionnaire implemented in the FIP wizard for addressing each of the FAIR principles. And the FAIR implementation profile approach has developed starting as a survey, as I said, addressing each of the FAIR principles, and these responses that you can provide to this survey reflect technical choices how to implement the FAIR principles, such as handle PID, DCAT, ENFDAS, observation, measurement, and sample as a specification. and many more. And these resources are declared as a community expression about the use of these resources or the future recommendations. So you see a FAIR implementation profile is a list of FAIR enabling resources. Nothing more, but actually important to declare them and also to share them to other communities to inform how you implement FAIR. So for being able to structure this in a way that can be shared and understood by others, we developed a typology of FAIR enabling resources, which are here shown in gray, addressing each of the FAIR principles, like identifier service for F1, registries for F4, and so on. We have developed these typologies, and we distinguish here 3 groups: FAIR supporting services, FAIR specification, FAIR data policies. And on top of these, we have also FAIR supporting resources that are useful but not essential to implement them, like editors, validation services, provenance tracking services, or crosswalks that help to map from one specification to the others. So these are, in addition, also defined and used. And here you see the whole ecosystem that we provided. So we have this specification called the FAIR implementation profile ontology, including this FAIR supporting resource typology, which everything is based on. We use the FIP wizard as the editor to create FAIR implementation profiles, but also to create metadata about FAIR supporting resources or reuse existing metadata description, for example, from FAIR sharing. And so we use this editor to fill out the FIP questionnaire, but also to provide metadata if not existing of FAIR supporting resources. We represent them in the format of a nano publication, which is a RDF graphs, represented as RDF graphs. These are submitted and published in a nanopub server network that can be harvested from FAIR Connect, so that FAIR Connect can be used as a registry of FAIR implementation profiles and the supporting resources. But they are also actually at the same time published as GitHub issues in a FAIR supporting resource curation GitHub, so that they can be peer-reviewed and accepted, approved by a community that is trained by GO-FAIR Foundation. There are many people around to check the quality of these and improve these metadata. And once they are approved, they are annotated as this also in the FIP wizard. So this is the whole environment that this builds up. And you can see that we have quite many users, around 400 users of the FIP wizard, 200 communities, so groupings of people that are interested to go FAIR together. They published around 600 FIPs, and they provided 1,300 FAIR supporting resource descriptions that they use. So it's about the resources they use, not all the resources that exist. And all of these can be found on fairconnect.pro. You can also see that we have different communities participating, distinguished in domains like environmental sciences. Here we have more than 30 communities. Then we have also oceanography, atmospheric, and so on. And it goes to life sciences, ecosystem science, and humanities and social sciences. You see, it's quite broad from the topics. Now, let me finish by saying why we think it's a nice approach. They enable informed FAIR assessments about community-agreed standards, also to be used in automatic FAIR assessment tools. FIPS establish a roadmap and a plan how to implement the FAIR principles. They can provide recommended FAIR enabling resources also for data management plans as decided by a community of practice. So thank you for your attention. This gives just an idea of what we are doing here, and I hope it can somehow be beneficial also to other communities. Let's now move to the flash talks and hear 3 speakers setting the scene, creating, curating, and using FAIR enabling resources outside this environment that I have presented. And I am happy to introduce Susanna Sansone, who is the founder of FAIR Sharing, a solution, a service that hosts standards interrelated to databases and data policies. And Susanna is Professor of Data Readiness and Director of the Oxford E-Research Center and University Academic Lead for Research Practice at the University of Oxford. Susanna, the floor is yours, and I give over to you also the screen.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you very much, Wolfram, and thank you very much to the organizer for sorting out our participation via Zoom. Just 1 second, I thought I'd share it. For some mysterious reason, I now don't see anymore when I try to share. The beauty. Oh, there you go. Now I do apologize. There we go. Hopefully, I'm going to put in. Right. So I hope this is full screen. If you can give me a nod that you can see it.
Yes.
All fine.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Barbara. Okay. So I'll use my hopefully quick minute wisely. So, yes, I was trying to move in slides. So, like Barbara was saying, what is essential to FAIR, to implementing FAIR? It's the use of standard appropriate resources, identifiers, so on and so forth, as we all know. So I'm not going to go in this detail, but there is a lot of there's a large number of standards out there, different type of standard, different level of maturity. And there is a number of databases which are essential that they use this standard to ensure the data is actually fair. And it's important that policy from funder, from institution, from publisher recommend the use of this standard so that there is actually a bigger uptake. But it's quite challenging to find these resources if you are a researcher, but also if you are a developer of tools that need to implement the standards. So are you implementing databases? You want to know what standards are out there and are relevant for your data. Or you are a policymaker and you don't know what to recommend. Or if you are a developer of this standard, you want to make sure that you are not inventing it or you are connecting to a related type of standards. If we look at numbers and across all the disciplines, there are almost 2,000 standards across guidelines, format model, terminology, ontology, vocabulary, taxonomy, identifier schema as well. They have different level of maturity. Some are ready, some are in development, some have been deprecated and superseded by other things. And only less than half actually are implemented by data resources. And that's quite important because it shows the maturity level of the standard really vary across the different disciplines. If you look at database, the landscape is much bigger. We have many more databases, institutional, knowledge base, repository, some which are knowledge base and repository. And again, the level of maturity of those resources are different, and different is also the way that they implement the standards, and not all implement standards. So it's an evolving landscape, and it's important to understand how mature it is when we recommend to community or to user how to put FAIR in practice, so using the standard and data resources. And somehow this has been the mission behind FAIR sharing, which is a service. It's both a registry and a tool its own, which mature under the Research Data Alliance. So we have a working group which is in maintenance mode because we work with other community in uptake and usage of the resource. What FAIR sharing does, enable tracking, discovering, and adopting and educating people to use this standard, to use these databases and in policy. So we describe these three types of objects, the data resources, the data policy, and the type of standard, and how they are relating to each other, because they are quite interconnected. There are standards that work in stack, and they need to be used as such. There are repositories which are connected, exchange data. So all this connection is quite important. So the resource use both the consumer of this standard and repository, but also the producer to make things visible. But it's also a service because it's connectable through the API, so the content power other tools, including the FIPS, and I will briefly mention this. I'm not going to go into the detail of showing screenshot of what FAIR sharing is or does, but it's only to say that we don't hold the standard, we just describe it. So it's about the description. So we describe them in detail and identify them as well. So when you look for a standard, in this case it's an ontology, you will know the maintainer, you will know the lifecycle status, you will know if there is a standard related to it, if there is a database that implemented, which one, how many. The relations, like I said, are quite important. The relations are both visually represented in a knowledge graph. So underneath FAIR sharing is a knowledge graph. So the value of this relation, like I said, it's important because standards aren't used in single. They tend to be used in pair or more. So they are used as stack and as package. And like Barbara was saying, explain what the community use. It's a way of profiling the way that they're approaching FAIR or they're working to implement in FAIR. And part of this is what also FAIR sharing does. An example is we work with an organization, in this case I picked up a biodiversity organization which has several sub-organizations. And what they wanted to do is to indeed knowing the different GBIF locations, what kind of standard repository policy they were using it, having as a page which can be branded and having as a graph which can be explored. Another type of work we're doing, profiling, in this case more like at standard level, what a community in a certain discipline, in this case astrophysics and astronomy, as part of a European research infrastructure called ESCAPE, what kind of standard they adopt as a community, and therefore they recommend it to others. And some of the standards have been developed by the same community, and some have been adopted by this community. So again, this collection in FAIR sharing are kind of profiled for this community on the type of standard they use, and are obviously explorable using the functionality that FAIR sharing offers. We are building this content not on its own, not in isolation. We're building with the community, and that's where the RDA working group was essential. And we also got seed funds from RDA and from European EOSC project to launch what's called the FAIR Sharing Community Champion Program. And we have celebrated 3 years, so we are so grateful also to the RDA for this. We're celebrating 3 years, and we have community from different disciplines that come and ensure that the content in FAIR sharing, it's the one that reflect what their community use. So it's vetted by the community. 2 more slides than I've done, and I use my 8 minutes. Like I said, the content need to be machine actionable, is machine actionable in FAIR sharing because powers out other tools. And in this case, it's an example of how it powers a data management plan tool called Data Stewardship Wizard in informing the user of the Data Stewardship Wizard on how to use a standard, when to use a standard, what kind of standard, depending on the data type and depending on the needs. What is also interesting about the Data Stewardship Wizard that it underpins the FIP wizard, which Barbara mentioned earlier. I'm sure Christine will present later, because then the connection, it's also there when people want to create a FIP profiles. So in FAIR sharing, the information is taken also from FAIR sharing, and when it's missing FAIR sharing, we get a notification so we can enrich it. And with this, I want to thank you again, the organizer, for inviting me, and the technical support for enable our participation remotely. Thank you very much.
Shall I just, I'll just launch into announcing myself then. Okay, I'm Simon Hodgson, I'm the Executive Director of CODATA. I'm going to talk about CDIF, the Cross-Domain Interoperability Framework. Now we've heard, I like the title of this session, Yellow Pages for Standards and for Fair Enabling Resources. We've heard from Susanna and Fair Sharing, which is genuinely a directory of standards, and that also shows interconnections between standards or among standards. And we have the FAIR implementation profiles, which can help point you towards particular FAIR enabling resources or standards or solutions to address the FAIR principles and particular subcomponents of the FAIR principles. The cross-domain interoperability framework is a little different. It's not as broad in scope. It's focused, and it really wants to be a playbook for implementation of standards for very specific purposes. So it starts from the premise that you may want your data to be aggregatable or integratable. It analyzes and addresses a number of functional requirements for those objectives, and then it recommends a set of standards, often domain neutral standards, and indicates how you might implement those. It provides guidelines and indeed code examples. So it's very much a playbook. So I hope it fits into this session, but on a rather more focused and playbook style, even practical level. The Cross-Domain Interoperability Framework came out of the World Fair project, though it has its roots in work that existed even before World Fair. It is categorically not a new standard. As I said, it's a playbook that points to particular standards and provides examples of how to implement them. So during the World Fair project, and even before, we conducted this analysis of the functional requirements for aggregation of data, and particularly for data integration. We identified a number of those functional requirements, and at the end of the World Fair project, we published 5 profiles which help address those issues. Now, we're not saying for a moment that this is the finished product. We're aware of further work, and further work is underway to enhance and expand CDIF. But we think that interim work that was published at the end of the World Fair project is already pretty useful for a number of use cases. CDIF currently comprises 5 profiles on discovery, on access, on good practice with controlled vocabularies, on data description, I'll go into that a little bit, and on universals, which are often the connectors between data sets, time, space, and other things like units of measurement. The first report was published at that DOI there, but now we've translated it or moved it into this book, the CDIF book, and very much following that philosophy of trying to make a playbook that is a practical guide for CDIF implementation. So I'm going to talk about 2 of those profiles and then end with a summary of where we are and why it fits into this, and where we're going next, and why it fits into this category of falling into the interest of this session. The discovery profile. In the World Fair project, we looked around what we thought was good practice in a number of communities. Science on schema.org, the practice of ODIS, the Open Data Information System. In response to that and the needs of the use cases in World Fair, we developed the discovery profile. It comprises a content model, a set of fields to be completed. It recommends a JSON-LD serialization and using a schema.org vocabulary. and provides also a mapping to DCAT. But in particular, and very importantly, it also recommends that users use schema.org variable measured and publish the variables which are in the data set as part of the discovery metadata. And we think that's an important step forward. The data description profile recommends the use of DDI-CDI. That's DDI cross-domain integration. That has 3 specific components, of which 2 are particularly important. One is the structural description. What's the structure of the data set? Is it a wide tabular data set? Is it a long time series data set? Is it a set of key value pairs? Is it a multidimensional data model? And that's really important information, and it's really important information to have in a structured way to make it easier to decompose and recompose the data set when you're integrating data. The other important feature of DDI-CDI is the variable cascade. That establishes a semantic link between the description, the concept of the variable, and how it's implemented in the data set. And that, in conjunction with the structural description, as I say, is incredibly powerful as a tool to decompose and recompose the data set. So CDIF is a work in progress. We're continuing work to refine those existing profiles and those recommendations and that guideline on how to implement it. And we're looking at context, provenance, data quality, continuing work on mappings and data description, and work on the access profile as well, which is extending that beyond ODRL to DPV and GEO. And if you're in the session earlier today, you'd know a little bit more about that. So how is CDIF a curated collection of FAIR enabling resources? Well, it's not quite that. As I say, it's a playbook. It makes clear recommendations. It provides examples and guidelines of what to do. And then it makes gives specific examples of code to use. And here on the slide are some examples of those recommendations, the specific cross-domain or domain-neutral standards it recommends, and some indication of our further work. So hopefully CDIF fits into this session and is a useful playbook for FAIRification, if you like, or I think what we'd prefer to think of as making data sets interoperable and combinable for specific research objectives. Thank you, Wolmar.
Okay, and thanks everyone for coming to this session. I want to say hello online to my good friend Susanna and Barbara. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be in the session with you. And I'm going to have some support from John Graybill, my partner in crime here. So let's see. Oh, here we go. This one. Okay, thank you. Okay, so just a little bit of background about our contribution to the Yellow Pages of FAIR Enabling Resources. So we've had the privilege to take part in this landscaping project for the National Institutes of Health, their Institute of Allergy, Immunology, and Infectious Disease. And they wanted to look across their considerable number of data resources to see what are the opportunities to make things more interoperable using the FAIR principles, but really anything that helps produce more scientifically impactful research. And so GO-FAIR US at the San Diego Supercomputer Center with our partners with the GO-FAIR Foundation and NCAR entered into this project. And so one of these results, and we have these nice postcards which have links to the papers and the different sites to learn things about, and I'll come around at some point and bring you a few. We were looking, the short story is we were looking at all of the repositories individually, and which is labor intensive, which we'll talk about in a session later this week, FAIRifying at scale. But we started to see some trends, and so we were able to say, let's pivot to some cross-cutting recommendations. And NIAID took those, and working together created what they call their blueprint for digital objects, which the idea is that if you standardize your units of data to have some interoperable metadata, that can be exposed to other places, such as they have a data ecosystem portal, APIs, things, MCPs, really limitless, and it can evolve with technology. And so it's really based around 5 key areas: minimum metadata schema, minimum API spec, PIDs, citation guidelines for measuring impact, and then an outreach and training component that creates a network of contact points. And so you can see these ontologies are a kind of a FAIR enabling resource, where in this minimum metadata schema, and it's not a thou shalt, it's a suggestion, it's an intellectual exercise. It's if you don't have something else you've chosen, look at these. Or if you have chosen something, it would be a good idea for you to be mapping to these things. And so there's some specifics which people had really yearned for, to say, just tell us the answer. And so we've given them some fill in the blanks, and John's going to tell you how that turns into the yellow pages of FAIR.
Thank you, Christine. So this will go briskly. Most of you are probably familiar with the FAIR types themselves, which are based on the FAIR principles. And from those FAIR types, the questions for the FIP wizard, where the forms are filled out that answer the questions, the FIP wizard questions were developed, and then the answers become the actual references to specific FAIR enabling resources, what we're talking about today. Now, in our profile pipeline that we created for NIAD, we took those FAIRs, those answers, and exported them into the CSV format. And they can be analyzed just like that if you want, but we went a slightly different direction. We supported exporting them into this spreadsheet that you see on the lower right. All the details, you have to read those to understand it, but not now. And so that enables us to essentially do a computation or a summarization of the information that's in the FAIRs that have been entered. The thing that we do along the way is make sure that every one of those FAIR enabling resources has been rated by us as to its fairness. And to do that, we created a whole set of questions that I call here the FAIR fairness questions. And each of those has 5 answers that gives you a rating for that resource. And so from those ratings of individual resources, you get a much more refined view. Instead of saying, well, this person answered 7 questions and this repository answered 8 questions, you actually can see that they're using resources that actually help them be more fair, or on the other hand, are barely helping them at all be more fair. And in this pipeline, this sort of right side of the equation here, of the page here, we're also able to generate summary reports, nice little colorful charts, or even at some point we may be able to do what I call a FIP check report, a textual description. So how does this thing that we just did, that looks like a fancy spreadsheet for buying a car or something, how does this pipeline encourage the fairness? Every one of the steps that I just described has its own contribution. At the beginning, the FAIR types themselves are helping the repositories get a picture of what fairness is about. The questions are providing specific prompting that forces them to think about, do we have an identifier? Do we have a standard for our ontologies? And so that standardization process is a part of the prompting that's going on and the making them think about what they're doing. And so on down the line, the answers are starting to provide visibility into the repository's choices that can be used to evaluate them and let them collaborate with others. The ratings are providing guidance about specific choices of resources. And the values and the views in the report all are enabling feedback in very specific ways about what they've done. So in summary, the FIP pipeline can encourage fair behavior by any provider of fair enabling resource, but it's not a panacea. It requires trust and open sharing of data to be really effective, so you can see and share with other people what they're doing and who you might be able to collaborate with and how. It doesn't support certain aspects that the FIP wizard can support right now, but it is capable of having that added and of being improved. I'm just going to acknowledge broadly the GO-FAIR Foundation and their principles. You heard from Barbara. Eric and Bert behind the scenes have also been heavily involved with us in GO-FAIR US to help us learn about the details of the FIP wizard and the FIP process. And Seung-Ha Kang, in particular of GO-FAIR US, was an intern that worked with us last year and is now becoming a GO-FAIR Foundation fellow. And she was the primary author of all of the FIP check spreadsheet that you see here. So there are a couple of other pipeline resources I haven't really talked about, and I'll be back up to go into a little more detail about what I've just talked about. Nanodash is a very useful repository for capturing and making all of these resources public. And the FAIR Convergent Pipeline is a paper that Eric and Barbara and others wrote that helped outline how communities can collectively make use of these resources. So that's the conclusion of my report, and we come back to you, I believe. I'll leave that with you. You probably need it.
All right. Thank you so much to all the speakers. I think we should switch back to the Mentimeter briefly. And I did only see a few questions. So please do add a few. I think the first one here is for Barbara, so the initial speaker. And I can't really read it from here. Let me see if I can get it up here. 1 second. So Barbara, is there a visual graph that shows how the different services are connected? For example, FAIR sharing, FAIR Connect, NanoPub, etc. So you presented many different examples of services. How are they related?
For the visual graph, I would have to find it, but actually my overview slide about the ecosystem was also showing this to a certain extent. I will share this again if possible. So the FIP wizard, I hope you can see it. I will make it bigger. The FIP wizard is the entry point where you can define knowledge models that are based on the ontology. So you follow completely the structure of the ontology, and then you can also export everything that is created or filled in the FIP wizard in different formats, like CSV or JSON, or also RDF nano publications, because they have document templates that you can pre-configure. And what the knowledge models also allow is to add some integrations from APIs, then trying to really access the information that is shared via the FAIR sharing API, so that you can reuse them, the resources directly in the FIP wizard. And and the output is here a nano publication. This is how it is connected, and then we have like an automatic script that checks what is published in the NanoPub server and then published as an issue to be checked by at least 2 people to check the quality of these resources. And because everything is RDF, you have a triple store that you can query with Sparkle queries, and we use these Sparkle queries for a registry of FIPS and FAIR supporting resources in FAIR Connect. So RDF is linked data. It's easy to explore and query. I hope I could answer that to some extent. I know that actually, if I can share still that thing, let me show. Susanna had a link showing how we connect FAIR sharing with the FIP wizard. I think it's the last one of the last slides here. Yeah. You see that the exchange is via an API, so we can access all the resources in FAIR sharing and automatically pre-fill a template in the BISET. And so we have the input from fair sharing, but the output in nano publications.
All right, thank you so much, Barbara. Next question is for Simon, and I'm thinking maybe we could also start populating the panel as we answer the question. So then we can maybe save some time and we can see the panel with some of the questions from the Q&A. After we've answered a few questions that are directed to individual speakers, I'm going to give the word to Raina Jenkins from the World Data Systems. But Simon, please go ahead. And then I think there's a question also for Christine, so I will call you up here.
So I read the question as I was coming up. How does it support domain-specific use cases? So although the premise of CDIF is to help cross-domain interoperability or interoperability or data combination when our objective is interdisciplinary, we would argue that the same principles apply to the use case where you need to aggregate data in a given domain, or even as we're finding in a number of our subsequent projects where the data from different sources in the same domain actually require addressing some of the same issues as data from different domains. For example, we currently have a project called CDIF for XAS. We're applying the CDIF principles and guidelines to X-ray absorption spectroscopy data. There are many different formats, many different standards, if that's a word when there are so many, and the community has coalesced around two in particular, XDI and Nexus. And what we've done is have done a mapping of those two standards to CDIF, which they can then form an interchange format to help in the combination, the aggregation in some instances, the combination in others, of data from different beamlines, different facilities, etc. So there's a very concrete use case there where you need to combine data from many different sources, but within the same discipline, which has slightly different standards or practices applied. And you scratch the surface of any disciplinary practice, and you regularly find that things are such, and something like CDIF can play an important role there.
All right, fantastic. So next question, that's for Christine and John. So if you could join on stage and answer the question. I'm not sure if you can see it though, so I'm going to read it up.
That's okay, I have it on my phone here.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, so I thought it was a great question, so let me just restate it. Was it easy to get people on board with creating and making use of the FAIR implementation profiles? So we've used FIPS in a variety of ways. For this project, the team actually did a series of interviews and other surveillance in a positive way about the repositories and filled out the FIP themselves on our team as a starting point for a discussion. And so we're at the second phase now that we have the NIAD blueprint of engaging people for training and outreach, that will invite people to come and amend or create their own and go through those exercises. And I think with the FIP, I don't know that it was said already, but we always like to say the journey is the reward. It's not just having the finished FIP, it's really about having those conversations.
Yeah, so we did have to get one customer on board to make progress or to go forward with FIP, and that was the customer, the ODSET team in NIAD. We had to convince them that there was value here from a surveying perspective and from a learning perspective. And it actually was a couple of different presentations and conversations. And I'm not sure exactly when the switch flipped from, that's interesting, to, we would like to proceed with that. But I think having examples in hand that we had done and being able to make statements about what we had achieved and learned in that process, all of those kinds of things were helpful in getting enthusiasm beyond ourselves. And they were data-oriented people, so that helped a lot. the one challenge that we're still wrestling with, if you like, is that in the ideal scenario, these systems work in a community of communities that are interested in collaborating or can become interested in collaborating. And so they are sharing their information with the other communities. With you may have heard me say the word rating or evaluation a lot. With the way this is set up, the pipeline that I described earlier, it's creating a bit of a database about that could be treated in a performative way. Did you pass? Did you fail? Were you good? Were you poor? And that makes everybody just a little bit anxious because not everybody wants to say, here's my results, you know, you were 20%, you were 80%, or you were very poor and you were very good. Not that we use those terms in any of our... So it's an ongoing process to get the engagement and the agreement. But from a technical perspective, it's been really fun to be able to see this information summarized and useful in a way that wasn't possible at all before.
Fantastic. All right, so with that, I'm going to welcome our final panelist who hasn't given a speech just yet. If there's a question for Susanna, then please also kind of add something here to the Mentimeter if you haven't already. But maybe you can introduce yourself. We do have a slide as well that we could switch back to, perhaps, in the slide deck. So I think maybe we have gotten a little bit too far here. There we go.
Yeah, that's correct. And so just to point out, my name on the slides is Raina Broadhurst. I know I was introduced as Raina Jenkins, but that's just because I'm gradually transitioning to my married name, which is Broadhurst, but it's in that point of I'm named both. I'm glad to be invited into this panel. The World Data System as a trusted community of data repositories is obviously working towards fair compliance, and I really like this mechanism of fair implementation profiles as a way to disclose and show how are they meeting the FAIR requirements. We have recently been allocated as a recognized expert community as part of the Leiden Institute for Fair and Equitable Sciences that launched just over a year ago. And so as part of that, what we're planning to do is to socialize this concept more within the data repository community, onboard them into providing more FIPS into the system. And then I'm really excited, I was glad to see the FAIR sharing presentation because I do really think there's a lot of power in having these FIPS connected to these other registries like FAIR sharing at Re3 Data, so that we can better look at the knowledge graphs and look at synergies and differences across these communities, and better figure out, okay, well, where do we need crosswalks? Where is there divergences? Where can we work better together across disciplines? So I think that will provide us a great mechanism to really see what's happening and how it evolves over time. And also, I'm thinking too, with respect to data repositories with the Core Trust Seal certification, it also provides another layer of evidence for how these repositories are meeting those requirements and in a more interoperable way. And so maybe the extensive process that is currently done by these reviewers in Core Trust Seal could maybe be more streamlined with more automated checks and validations if this machine actionable information is more readily available rather than these sort of handcrafted and very manual verifications that are currently done, and speed up that process. And I know some of the data repositories do struggle with in that, and also the Core Trust Seal reviewers. So those are some of the advances I hope to see as these systems mature, but really excited to be part of this panel. Yeah.
Fantastic. So thank you so much. Now you have been introduced to all of the panelists with a short introduction by themselves, a reflection after they prepared their presentations, and also a little bit reflection on why I invited them, is that, I mean, they represent the perspectives maybe of some curating collections of these fair enabling resources, some finding ways of promoting very strong standards that could support a fair implementation. Others working with the community and having an example of walking through a process using fair implementation profiles. But then, I mean, it could perhaps also be a generalized experience if there are other ways of doing the same thing. And then a use case for, I mean, across a lot of databases where you might find a use for these kind of controlled resources and starting your journey on this. I see that there is one question here, and this is the question I've added myself, that has an upvote. But let's start off the panel, and I'm addressing this to Susanna since she didn't get a question addressed specifically to her, and I think this could still be useful. If we switch back to the Mentimeter, you should all be able to see it on the screen, and I will read it. So, what can your organizations and the RDA community do to make it easier for people to find, endorse, and promote adoption of successful and promising combinations of fair enabling resources? So a little bit of a mouthful, but I mean, what can your organizations do? And if there are a path to working with the RDA community on grouping and suggesting standards? Susanna, would you like to reflect on that?
Yeah, thank you. I believe I actually address it. I try to address that question with the example. What we try to do as an organization, if the question is for fair sharing, I think what we have done with the Community Champion Program and working with the community to have them to have the profile of what they use, to have them the collection of the standard that they actually have developed or they endorse, and a combination of those as a stack. It's, I think, the most useful and successful way of showing the way, because it actually shows to other people what the community is doing and the experience of the community of using it.
All right, thanks a lot. So anyone who wants to go next for stabbing an answer to this question, do you see that there's a path to integrating some of your work into the RDA community, or, I mean, promoting it somehow?
Barbara has a hands up virtually. I can see her.
All right.
Can I just jump in and say, well, what we do is actually, I know asking all these questions can be quite technical and difficult for domain experts, and it's not really the most sexy topic, because it is somehow dry to discuss about technologies, right? So the audience for such a FIP workshop must be a mixed one. So you need data stewards and domain experts. And I think the cool thing is that we allow, by having workshops around the FIP, is to think about a better implementation of the FAIR principles, and then also to decide on which way to go. It is a decision moment. It's not something that we want to prescribe as GO-FAIR Foundation. We just give a platform to make these decisions very clear, compare with existing other solutions, also other community choices of in the same domain. So I think that's what we want to allow with this approach. And actually, I am aware that many of these questions are not easily answered and need some background information, knowledge. So that's why we in GO-FAIR Foundation have established a capacity building program for those, or for the data stewards, for representatives wanting to dive into the deep knowledge of FAIR implementation. So we have built this capacity building program and guide them through specific content so that they can approach it better and better and understand it better. But I see it's not an easy process, as John said. John and Sunga have created the FIPS for all these NIAID repositories, but as a to start a process, a discussion process. I think that's it, right? We want to just prepare a grounding for a better discussion.
Perfect. Anyone else want to answer the same question? I see Simon raising his hand.
So hopefully I communicated that CDIF there's a vision behind CDIF, and it's one that emerged from the World Fair project and some of the work that we're doing. So we have a clear idea of what we want to do, but we also know that that's an evolving thing, and that we need to address a number of specific challenges that are associated with that overall vision. I hope also I communicated that CDIF is an inherently modular product, that there are a number of specific challenges that need to be addressed in interoperability and in data combination. And that modularity gives us opportunities and even requires of us that we collaborate openly and with particular communities. There are various activities in RDA in which we're very interested. In particular, we think that the work that Barbara has done and colleagues on iAdopt is extremely interesting and useful and pertinent for the objectives of CDIF. Variables can often be complex things, and the way that iAdopt presents a variable associated with other concepts and constraints is potentially really powerful and fits exactly in the work that we want to do with the variable cascade, as I explained. So that's an example. So we're very keen to collaborate there. We're also aware of the work that's going on in the FAIR mappings working group and the use and extension, the use of SESM and the extensions to SESM. This is really important work. So our approach with CDIF, because we have a vision of what we want to produce, and then is to collaborate with groups, whether they're in RDA or elsewhere, on particular components. And I think we have to be targeted and practical in those collaborations.
Perfect. So I see Jana.
Sure. Some of the things that we've been thinking about in terms of the world data system and how we can help drive some of this forward and maybe then hopefully begin to showcase some of the champions or some of the really good use cases is to really start by that socializing of the concept, some training with the repository community, helping them develop and contribute to these FAIR implementation profiles. But another application that I think is also quite potentially useful is with the federated systems. It's probably, hopefully, a very good resource for them to look at their communities and figure out better ways to harvest the information or to represent the information on their search interfaces when they better understand, say, the vocabularies or the way the content is being described by those repositories that they're targeting for distribution. So I think that I would like to kind of work with federated systems and repositories together in this work to really enable that interoperability in the community and allow them to really see the power of, oh, if we disclose this information, it's so much easier to come to terms with how to align better. Having worked as a data repository in my past and trying to work with federated systems, that can be very difficult to identify a clear path forward, and I think by having this information so well described, it will really enable that to drive further forward. So I think some of these cases might help demonstrate the power. So I think we need to think on use cases and then find out exemplifiers of those use cases, and this federated system integration with repositories is one that I really do see as an important one to look to.
Fantastic. Do you want to answer the same question, or do you want to follow up on the next one?
Oh, no. Go ahead with the next one.
So the next one, though, ties very well into the last comment there on driving maybe towards convergence. So let me, I'm not sure if we can get it on screen, but how to encourage and support convergence. Is it possible and meaningful? And Simon's answer, I think, is obvious, so maybe you can.
As long as it's convergence, I think too often people say that and they mean homogenization. And that's obviously, that's like, there's one right answer, it's mine. Well, that doesn't work, right? And so this is where it's a socio-technical problem, not a technical problem. And so, but I mean, this is why I'm proud to be part of CODATA and the RDA and affiliated with the WDS, because this is where that kind of work happens.
Fantastic. So with that, I'd like to move into maybe more of getting your opinion from the audience as well. So I'm going to move the Mentimeter to the next slide. I hope this works on the phone. Let's see. Check into the collaborative notes. Yes, you should do that, but I'm not sure that was the slide that I was trying to get to. So if you haven't already found the collaborative notes, please click on this link and then maybe see if I can get to the right slide. What groups do you engage? Let me see if we can get back to the slide deck. Then I'm gonna, maybe that can help me orient it a little bit. So here on the panel that I have in front of me, I see now the Zoom room. If that could be changed. Thank you so much. So the discussion then would be the synthesis here. So what would be opportunities for future work that you would like to engage in? And I mean, many of you are already engaged in other groups, and I'd like to hear from you. So what could be a potential venue for synergies on these topics, like with the CDIF or the FIP approach, or something else on supporting the use of fair enabling resources and describing what your approach to using a collection or promoting a collection of fair enabling resources would be. So there's a template that I've set up for you to share your community or a group description and your name so we can get in touch with you. Don't feel forced to use it, but I have used it for myself. And this is also something you can just fill in using the Mentimeter. So the idea is that based on the meeting objectives, what do you think you would like to bring into this discussion? And for me, that would be the RDA Life Sciences Data Interest Group that I described in the beginning, where this idea kind of started, but we might not be the right group to really bring this into a recommendation. We would need some help with others from other communities and interest group to work on this together. And then there's an example from Barbara, and I think she already described this in her introductory presentation, but stop me if I'm wrong. So this is just an example. And then we have an example from John, and I'm not sure if this is the same or if it's slightly different from the presentation you had. But if you want to say a word, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just, excuse me. I'll just convey that this is a very early stage evolution of this product and capability. And so it's quite open to the possibility that others would like to take it and encourage it. There's a paper being published on it shortly. So it should be quite possible if people want to play with it, adopt it, maybe co-develop it. All of these things are possible and a potential good way to move forward. I've talked to at least one person in this room who I know is potentially thinking of using that. So it's sort of exciting times when you first see something come into existence, and then anything can happen after that.
Yeah, can I just follow up on your John's?
Sure.
Yeah, Sunga is now a fellow at GO-FAIR Foundation, and that's on purpose I invited her to be there because I saw the great work that you both did, and actually my initial thought is, well, I just want to help together with Eric to prepare the grounding to declare to use something, but how fair it is another discussion, and I'm so happy that you have took it up. And we also know that there are fair assessment initiatives, evaluators, automatic evaluators, etc. But so far it was not easy. They were focused on assessing the fair level of data and or digital objects, but not so much on the fair enabling resources themselves. So I think it would be great if in the future months we can collaborate and also connect these different communities so that we can semi-automatize also this process. And I will work together with Sunga in her fellowship on implementing or integrating the work you have done in the whole FIP ecosystem in a more semi-automatic way. But I think it's not only us that should work on this, but also the experts on fair assessment, like the people from Fuji or fair evaluators with Mark Wilkinson, etc.
Yeah. Sorry, we just lost your voice, Barbara.
So did you hear anything? Or
yes. No, we were just the last half sentence. It went away.
Yeah, it was just the collaboration with people like Mark Wilkinson or Robert Huber from Fuji, or the many tools that are around where we can learn so much, and then with your questions integrate this together. So find collaborations on this, because we just did the first step right in this direction.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to jump on that briefly, covering that last slide that was up briefly that I didn't speak to, because the problem that you run into, I think, is it's not enough to be able to say we use an identifier. In my mind, it's not enough to say we're using an identifier service. It actually can be helpful to figure out why that identifier service and whether there might be a better identifier service in terms of making your repository or your service fair. So the questions that are designed for our own judgments, evaluations, are targeting each of these different types of FIRs. Thank you for bringing that up again. And you can see the detail in the lower left corner of the types of answers that you might give to those questions, or that your particular service that's being provided. So when we are evaluating, it's nominally, hopefully, objective and standardized. We haven't performed those tests yet, but ideally it gives people a way to say, oh, I have this identifier service. Is it a fair service, or whatever kind of FIR you're developing? How can I make it more of a FIR service? And that's part of the answer to your convergence question, is more and more of these discussions happen where there's feedback to the people providing services, and whether they love this particular way of evaluating those services or not, it's a thought process and a discussion process. And hopefully it turns into people say, hey, I'd like to be more like that in my services or in my repository.
Fantastic, thank you so much. So with that, I mean, if you want to, there is a link to a copy of this slide, and you can fill it in. Or if we jump back to the Mentimeter, now I'm really hoping that this should be the right one, and there's only one suggestion so far. Maybe I can ask for those in the room, if you raise your hand, is this a topic that you are interested in working on? I see a few hands at least, so I'm not going to hold you to it. If you write your name here, that means that I will reach out to you and give you an invitation to continue the discussion. I mean, you could add your name to the rolling notes, or you could write it here in the Mentimeter, and I will try to kind of reconnect with whatever information you have provided. I think, I mean, maybe your groups are candidates as well, the panelists. Are your hands raised? Yes, that's a good start. And I think Barbara, at least, is very much on board, as far as I know. So I think Barbara and I could kind of start drafting something that could turn into a charter or something on those lines for an interest group or a working group on this topic, and then making sure that we narrow it down to something that's useful. And I see a hand. Go ahead. Yeah,
I just wanted to come back to that earlier question about the convergence, because one thing that I often will see with data repositories with whether or not to adopt any particular standard or fair enabling resource, perhaps, is how widely adopted is it today. They don't necessarily want to be the early adopter. They want to see how it plays out. So I think this would be also, these registries would really enable they could search on any particular FAIR item and see, okay, which communities are using it, how many are there, is it widely adopted? I know a lot of individual FAIRs will then, try to keep tabs on who's using their systems and try to, maybe have some kind of web page or something where they say, oh, these are the adopters that currently exist, but this might also allow them to better know which ones that they want to highlight as well. So I think just that disclosure, that ability to actually really see who's using what, maybe they're trying to align themselves with a particular community. So I think just having that information out there will itself lead to that partial convergence, without necessarily even too much effort, just that resource. So that's something that I would think there.
Fantastic, thank you so much.
And
yeah, go ahead. I was thinking, I will find someone in the audience. If you raise your hand, I'm going to run out with the mic to you. But Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say the FAIR Connect platform shows how many are using it, who is using these FIPs or FAIR neighboring resources. It is a starting point. I know there can be much more than that, but we have also a tool to show the overlap of FAIR implementation profiles called the FIP matrix. But it's just a starting point. I'm really looking forward to integrate all these services better and work together with others. And I think that could be the task or the goal of this working group or whatever we are creating.
All right, thank you so much. I'm not sure there is anyone here from the audience who actually want to out what kind of interest they have. So maybe, oh, I do see someone now. Thank you so much.
This has been a very interesting session, and I just want to come back to Rainer's comment about the intersection across the various resources that have been showcased here, and really think about the possibility that sometimes people will get overwhelmed by the range and the variation of what's available. And I guess, would there be any consideration to, like, the top things that you might want to use as resources as a way to try and figure out whether this interest group could focus on the things that people, I guess the minimum requirement to try and meet FAIR requirements, and identifying those resources, because as Rainer's point was well made, that not all people want to be the early adopters. Some people want to use things that have been tried and tested. So I think that might be a couple of suggestions from me. Thank you.
Could you just mention who you are as well?
I'm Glynis Barradine. I'm the Data and AI Governance Lead at the CSRO here in Australia.
Thank you so much. And I think Simon already had an idea for, recommending some standards. So I'm not sure if there's anyone who has a comment from the panel.
Yeah, if it doesn't slip my mind, I do. The recommendation of resources seems like a element that it's very much on a continuum. That you talked about the minimum level, and the minimum level is really something that is very provider dependent. The provider of services, of repositories, are often, one person's minimum is not going to be the next person's minimum at all. So I think you are, if I'm interpreting what you said correctly, what I get out of it is that it's important to be able to provide people information at the level they're ready for it. And that's a really difficult challenge. We have arguments all the time about how much information to present to the customer about any of these things, because it gets tremendously detailed when you start diving into it. And so part of my goal, at least with some of these things, is that you can give people a simple process to follow, which starts giving them the information back in a more simply expressed form that's specific to them. Because if we can't do it that way, if it requires us experts to go in and advise them for days at a time, it's just not going to grab hold. So yeah, I want to adopt where you're going with that, I think, and see what we can do to make it easier and to simplify our expression of what we're doing so that everybody can get it.
Yeah, because I think probably the
Oops.
Wolmar? Ah.
Because I actually think the barrier to entry when you're looking at the level of detail and information and resources, sometimes that scares people off, and they have no idea where to start, and that's something that I grapple with a lot in data governance. So it's always front of mind for me is to keep it simple so that people can enter and then build. Thanks.
Thank you. Great comment.
Yeah, really sorry. The lights are horrible. I can't really see who's moving around. Go ahead, Barbara.
Wolmar? Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah, I completely agree with John. There's a lot of complexity behind. We cannot always show the whole complexity. People will run away. But just one notice or note on nano publications. They are great because you can say something about another nano publication. And in the editor, you just see a symbol, like you could have a score, more or less 2, 3 stars, and that's easy to communicate. And you can also see how many are using it with just a number, or although the number is arbitrary, yeah, because it depends how many people are using this. But I just say that we have a technology that is easy to use to add additional information, like recommended by a specific community. And this is what we have already established or provided this way, and I think it can be better. And I am really looking forward to work with you on this.
And if I can add just a few words on this, on the sense of recommendation, I think it is a challenging problem. Who is the authority to recommend things? And this is something that in FORSharing we were very careful ourselves as a resource provider not to do the recommendation, but having the community to do. And the way we're doing it isn't just through the champion, it's through research infrastructure, big research infrastructure. Now in Europe, they are under the EOSC umbrella, as you might know, and they are discipline domain research infrastructure. Elixir is one of them. So by working with that research infrastructure where there is the expertise and the knowledge and somehow the authority, then to have it percolated down to the organization within the research infrastructure, that's a way, in my opinion, to show the light. You know, they are lighthouse for other community in that area. So the research infrastructure, I would say.
All right, thank you so much. So given that we didn't have that much response to the suggested groups, I mean, please take the opportunity to write your name into the collaborative notes. And maybe we can go back to the questions in the Mentimeter just briefly to show the diversity of the kinds of questions that we might want to go back to and address after the session. And for those who wrote the name, we will go back to, send it out to you. Otherwise, the document will be available on the RDA website, so you can click it, and I will make sure that the answers to the questions are in that document, so you don't need to sign up to be involved in any communications to get the response. So one was on API endpoints that could use to connect existing FIPS. And then we have one on how to submit these FAIR enabling resources without using the wizard. So these are technical and quite specific questions related to the solution from GO-FAIR Foundation. I think we can answer those and provide you some guidance on how to find out more about their approach. There's also a question here that I think might be a little bit more general on who should create these FAIR implementation profiles. Is it data stewards, the repository manager, or the curator? And I think there's been some allude to this question.
Me, I should create them. That's what we did so far, but it's probably not the right answer.
I think on that last one, it's all of the above. It's a tool and a set of exercises, and there's even training curriculum from the GO-FAIR Foundation, and it can be used in a variety of ways. So the GO-FAIR Foundation and places like GO-FAIR US can talk to people about their needs and what they're trying to get at, and we can help advise you if how you might use this tool, either just you as a researcher or you as a part of a research group or a larger organization in your practices, and we can talk to you about how we've incorporated it. To this specific question, or the one previous about an API for FAIR enabling resources, I mean, principally, a FAIR enabling resource in the way that is designed by the GO-FAIR Foundation is a nano publication, kind of like a triple, and there is a way that you can connect and read those. I mean, it's streamed up specifically to be machine actionable, and so I hope that's an okay answer. If you want to know more, go to fairconnect.pro.
Simon.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to a couple of those questions, actually. So who should create FIPS? In the World Fair project, which is a 2-year European Commission funded project with 11 use cases, we used FIPS extensively. I left a couple of slides at the end of the presentation in the shared deck which speak to this. Each of the 11 case studies that we had in World Fair used FIPS. We used it as a heuristic exercise, and it was incredibly effective as such. I always felt, having been involved in discussions with Eric and Barbara, that the fundamental idea behind FIPS, a set of questions, how do you respond to the FAIR principles, was very, very useful. And our case studies found that as well. And some of them really ran with it and had this vision, which they presented in a report, of how each repository in their community should publish a FIP, and that would help in this general endeavor. So they got a very strong thumbs up in that way. We published a very detailed report on the pros and cons of using FIPS as well, because there was other feedback. And a number of our colleagues in the case studies did find that the entering the information through the FIP wizard was quite arduous. And there was also an argument that there was perhaps another way of presenting the information in the FIP, and a suggestion of specific code to use, such that that information could be harvested more generally, and perhaps more easily than the model of the nano publication, which, although it has virtues, it's a triple with provenance, is not widely used, and there are perhaps other ways of presenting that information. So at the end of the shared deck, there are 2 specific DOIs to those reports and that feedback, which contain that feedback from World Fair and the specific suggestion of how alternatively FIPS might be encoded in a way that the information can be gathered and harvested.
Fantastic. So maybe we will leave that as the final remark and let Barbara perhaps have some concluding remarks as one of the co-chairs of this session. If we move back to the slides, maybe we can find Simon's final slides as we progress through as well. So the final is the wrap-up and next steps. And I put this slide together, but Barbara, feel free to sum up if you have some other reflections from the session. I mean, a potential group is an option, and the collaborative notes will be a report from our discussions today. And maybe, Barbara, any reflections from your end?
Thank you very much, Simon, also for this comment. I think we have learned and heard the request to represent this also in other formats, and that's exactly what we were working on. So there was the idea to represent this in JSON. So this was always there, but I think a more simplified version of JSON LD would be very helpful. We have something in place for that, can still be improved, but I need feedback. So absolutely happy, to collaborate and work on this out in more detail so that we can accommodate the requirements. So I think that what we have heard today is there is some interest. We can make an interest group, a working group. I suggested 2 meeting times in November on Thursdays. But I think we will go out with this information on the website. Which website? I think, yeah, Wolmar, if you have any idea. It will be connected with this common notes, I think, document. Yeah?
That sounds
so
great.
Thank you very much for inviting us, Wolmar, also if we are not present in Australia, in Brisbane.
Yeah, and I'm really happy that you've joined me, even if it's really early morning, both you, Barbara, and Susanna. I think with this, I'll just scroll through Simon's slides, or maybe they were hidden, sorry about that. But the slide deck is also linked from the collaborative notes. I've moved back to that slide in the Mentimeter, so you have that on your phone or your computer. You should be able to get into the notes and find the link to the slide deck. And then you can find several links, I think, from each of them. There's also a link to this session's website, where there's a collection of links and also an introduction to the different organizations that our panelists and speakers represent. And I'm looking forward to working this into either a working group or an interest group, or merging it into one of your organizations and just finding some useful means to coordinate this that makes sense for those who were interested in the topic. So with that, thanks a lot, and an applaud to all of the panelists.